I am Chosen Mods, and this is All the Architects 10. What have you guys done to me? Okay, so hear me out. Magical bees. Yes, today we're going to be diving into the Productive Bees mod. Wait a minute, Chosen, you've already delved into mystical agriculture. Why in the world would you get into bees? Well, to that, I will tell you, there are things that you cannot do with just mystical agriculture alone. And if I want to get to that all the mod star, which of course I do want to get to it, I'm going to need to get a nice footing into the Productive Bees mod and, well, get it done sooner than later. Because to be able to produce these bees and actually make them useful down the road, we're going to have to get them up and running and start producing some very special bees. Now, just a little bit of a disclaimer, getting into productive bees can take quite a bit of time. And I will say this has probably one of the biggest time investments to resource production ratios, and is 100% why it's best to start now. So what are we actually going to be working towards today? Well, one you've kind of already seen. I do want to expand, and I want to have what is going to be bee hallways. Now, it's going to take me a while to get the bees up and running, but we will start working on at least having the building infrastructure for those bees in the future. By the end of today, I really just want one type of bee, and I want maybe multiple of those type of bees running. And to get those bees, we are going to need more dragon eggs, and to be able to make more dragon eggs, well, we need to place ourselves a dragon egg on top of an extractor to start producing more dragon eggs. And to break it down to you nice and easy, the best way to get started with this mod isn't actually by making basic bees. It's by actually getting yourself Draconic bees up and running as soon as humanly possible. Now, these bees do consume dragon's breath to be able to be spawned in faster, and thankfully you can use the dragon head and an extractor to give yourself plenty of dragon's breath. Now, some other tips that'll help you exceed and progress faster through productive bees is by completing the bumble zone if available in the pack you're playing. For example, in All the Mods, last episode, we went through the bumble zone and we completed it. Not only did we complete it, we pushed it even further and got us an essence of the knowing. And this allows us to have basically ESP in our world, being able to see chess, which is a fantastic utility, and also be able to identify the exact structure we're in within the left-hand corner while enabled. Absolutely amazing. But what is really going to help us progress is the pollen areas in this dimension, because pollen has some really nice uses. It is used to make honey treats, and honey treats are very important in the Productive Bees mod. It's what's going to allow us to accelerate nests in order to get these bees to come out quicker. And this is by far the biggest bottleneck of the mod, is collecting all of the very basic bees needed to be able to breed bees in the future. So step one of our operation is basically already done. We're using mystical agriculture, and we already have ourselves some honey seeds. Some seeds that allow us to make honeycombs and honey bottles, and allows us to make those treats much easier. But before we go on the hunt for all the bees, I think it would be best if we made ourselves some of those Draconic bees. Some other things to note: you are going to need yourself a nice supply of blaze rods, ender pearls, emeralds, and also diamonds to push yourself through this mod. Oh, and eventually nether stars. Lots of nether stars. So I'm now in the end, and this is going to be a pretty common theme of us going from biome to biome in order to get our productive bees working. So I need to make myself an obsidian nest, and it does feel kind of weird that this is our first step, but honestly, this is going to be the first step with us being this far through the mod pack. We need to get these bees up and running as soon as possible, and the longer they have time to run, the better. So I need to make more of them, so I'm working on making myself a diamond sword right now. There we go. And I'm thinking like maybe 2 hives. Honestly, we can get away with just having 1, I guess. And what I want to do is just have this placed in. And then we are going to be feeding it a few different things, but at first, I know a bee is going to come out of here, and I want to be able to trap that bee. So there is a nice little solution to trapping the bee that we can do, and it's by placing a fence and placing the block just like this. So by placing the spruce fence on top, basically the bee will spawn right here, and we can just simply collect it with a bee cage. Now, I do have some sturdies. You can actually trade these from villagers, I do believe, but you can make regular bee cages, and regular bee cages are a whole lot cheaper, but they are kind of a one-time use. If you open or release the bee cage is gone. Now, all I have to do is use a dragon's breath on this nest, and we're gonna see that the time it takes is going to be over 1,200 seconds in order to actually get a bee to pop out of here. But if you use more dragon's breath, it will cut down on that time. But now, remember we made a time wand automation? Oh yeah, that should also work, and it makes this significantly faster. You can see right here, we can see that timer going down rapidly, and all we have to do is pick up the bee just like that. And while that time is still running, might as well toss in another one. This is going to save us on the amount of resources by having the time one, but if you don't have the time one, you can just expend a whole bunch of dragon's breath on this to get the same effect. And this is why having either a time in the bottle or this is going to be really good. Oh wait, you don't have a time in the bottle because you haven't gotten into bees yet? Oh yeah, that's right. Because the time in the bottle takes this progression in order to even unlock it. So just make the time one. I beg you, just do that. So after catching all of those, you would think with bees that we would potentially need to have an area that is enclosed so those bees don't escape. But there's actually a way we can do bees without having to interact with bees just flying all over our base. And of course, the worst part, the dreaded bee escaping. We wouldn't want our exploited factory workers getting out, would we? To be able to make all of this possible, we're going to need a few things. One being a simulator upgrade. And this is where things get a little bit expensive. This is why I said the blaze rods, diamonds, emeralds, ender pearls, things like that you're going to need. Also some pollen puffs, all of that is going to be necessary. But the simulator upgrade is going to honestly be the primary way that we handle productive bees. It is going to be imperative to our future progression in this mod. Now, another thing that you have to use in incorporation with this is going to be a feeding slab. Now, also to be able to utilize this, we need a more advanced version of a beehive, not just our typical run-of-the-mill beehive. No, for this we need an advanced beehive. And I think what I'm going to do, I've already created the auto crafting recipe for this, but I'm going to go with acacia. Now, I think acacia, the hives are actually going to fit in to this build really, really well. Not only do we have this savanna colored grass, but we also have orange in our trees, and we're using green kind of for the floors. So I'm thinking this is going to go really well with this. So I can make a couple of these for right now, and I do recommend getting them on AutoCraft. They do take a little bit. And then you also need an expansion box. Now the expansion box goes on top of this. Beautiful. So we have just about everything we need now to go ahead and start farming bees. So let's first and foremost, let's go ahead and set up our basic bees. And this is how this is going to go, right? We're going to have a hive. This is the advanced beehive. And then the expansion box is going to go on top. And it's going to look something very similar to this. And I'm going to do it also on this side. We're going to end up setting up 4 sets of this today that is going to be producing all of these draconic bees. Now let me go ahead and show you something you don't want to do. When placing the feeding slab, do not block the front of your beehive. If you do this, your bees will not work. So you have to place it 1 block below, and it is a slab, so it works out perfect by placing it just like this in front of your hive. So thankfully, you can have this whole thing set up and you don't have to worry about anything so long as you don't block this front face right here. Before we start putting any bees in here, I'm going to go ahead and just put the simulator upgrade in each one of these hives, making life so much easier on us. And we can technically at this point start putting our bees in one at a time. So I have 5 because each of these hives can technically hold 5 individual bees. And all of these bees technically have different productivity rates and different stats. Later on, we can manipulate those stats, thankfully, but we can put them all in. And just like that, if we ever need to get a bee out, by the way, we can do this and it's going to pull the bee out one by one. So you can always get your bees out of here as well. But so long as we don't pull the simulator upgrade out of here, these bees will just reside inside of the beehive, simulating the fact of leaving and coming back and pollinating on whatever's inside of the feeding slab. Now, speaking of simulating the thing that goes in the slab, for these bees, we need either inactive dragon eggs, which would require you to progress through this mod a little bit by doing these things manually to get your essence, or if you have a way of duplicating dragon eggs like we do, you can kind of just progress and skip your way through this. And our dragon eggs, thankfully we set up right at the beginning, and we have more than enough dragon eggs for this particular operation. Just needing 4, and I can go ahead now, heading back and place this in. Now, some bees still, even with the simulation, do not work at night. So that is kind of something we need to keep in mind. These bees will not probably produce at night. There are ways, though, of getting your bees to produce at night, and that requires like hanging your bees out on a post over a couple of nights to get that genetic trait. I know, it sounds just as bad as it is. It really is a weird mechanic. Now, early on, each of these hives can receive some speed upgrades, which will definitely increase the rate at which this is going. And we are going to need 3 per hive, so 3 times 4. There we go, and we will be able to get speed upgrades to be put into each of our individual beehives. So now all of the beehives are set up. Okay, perfect. And they're already starting to produce technically, even with it being nighttime. I must have some in here that are diurnal, unless diurnal, I still don't know what that means. Yeah, apparently during the day, like it's only supposed to work during the day, but maybe I am wrong on the simulation here, because they did produce some combs, and like these produce combs as well. They are all of behavioral diurnal, which means they shouldn't be producing, but I mean, they definitely did at night. Maybe I'm wrong about the simulation, and maybe that completely negates that problem. But now that still doesn't change anything. We are now producing combs and also producing pollen puffs and technically producing honey, even though I am going to disregard the honey and just primarily focus on moving around those pollen puffs and also moving around the combs. And this is where I need to step back for a minute and think about the logistics of this problem. Every hive that we incorporate into this, we are going to have to put a filter on if we, for example, use the pipes mod, right? We're going to need to send, for example, the pollen into a certain place, and we're going to also need to send the combs into a certain place. This can become kind of a pain. Now, modular routers could solve this problem, and we could use modular routers to easily handle this. But what I'm thinking is maybe we can utilize Super Factory Manager in a really neat way. And I think I can show you guys some really cool tips to allow you to build your own programs for this. Now, to process these combs, we are going to need a centrifuge, for example, a powered centrifuge. And I'm kind of glad that we did dabble a tiny little bit into mechanism, because you do need the mechanism control circuits to be able to make your first centrifuge, or at least the one that receives power and is a bit faster. But essentially, I want it to make its way all the way down here into this location. So now I've worked on a little bit of a program, and I'm going to show you how simple you can actually make filters from within this and make this infinitely scalable, like with this SFM. So to be able to utilize SFM, we are going to need to connect these inventory cables up to the things that we want to actually connect to. For example, right here, I'm just going to connect it into here, and we have this inventory cable connected in just like so, and this is attached here. Now I have an inventory that's attached to these sides and the centrifuge attached here. But I could have the centrifuge anywhere so long as they're at least connected to this cable. Now, don't let the word SFM scare you, because I do want to show you how powerful and how easy this can actually be. You don't even really need to know anything about coding languages at all. You can just simply follow examples and just copy and paste. So we want to filter basically going in here, and I've already defined basically that we want to pull out of here, and then we want pollen puffs to go inside of this drawer. And then we want everything else, all the combs specifically, to go into the centrifuge. Well, thankfully, all of that can be defined, and we can even use the names. For example, puff in the pollen puff name. We can even use comb inside of the comb name. So we don't have to worry about anything that is prefixing that. And believe it or not, SFM does allow us to easily manage multiple connected inventories and use regex on it to do this. And if you're not familiar with regex, I'm going to do my best to kind of explain it. So let's let's pop open the Super Factory Manager and get into these examples. Now, before we even put a disk in here, we can view some of these really cool examples, and there's a lot of useful information here. One being filtering, which is what we're going to be working on here. Now, right off the top, you can definitely see that we have what is called limiting, where we can limit the amount of items going into a chest. So if we had a extraction pulling items out, we can say, hey, only ever allow 5 in that chest. Also, we can only allow 3 ingots in that chest, and so on and so forth. That's not what we're wanting today. What we're actually wanting to do is this right here. So it says use an asterisk to fuzzy match. Pretty interesting. And this quoted pattern allows us to do full regex. Now, we don't really need to worry about doing full regex and doing all of this stuff. Instead, you can just go ahead and use the asterisks here, which is really, really helpful. And what is in there will automatically get converted into that format that you see right here. And so using my code that I've gone ahead and placed in, you can see how we can handle all of this. So what we're going to do is we are going to input from the location that we define. Remember, these are definitions that we define with our label gun. I'm going to go ahead and exit. No, I'm going to save, continue editing. I think this will be best shown by me using my code. So if I go ahead and paste this in, which I typed up inside of a document just to make it easier to follow along with, it's going to be the same that we've used before. It's going to operate every tick, and you can just copy and paste this, by the way, from the example. If you're wondering, by the way, where you can get a base example, just go to view examples in a simple program, and this is that same simple program right here. So now with that knowledge, let's talk about how the reg actually works. So by default, we're going to pull just with non-discriminately straight out of the hive. And so with our label gun, we are going to define what hive is. So it's better to name these what you're actually going to be connecting them to. So I just am going to label this a hive. So that's going to pull from here. So now back in here, we then want to output puff. Now this is going to look for anything within the name that has the name puff inside of its ID. And you can hit F3 and H to be able to see those. So if we go and hover over here, you'll see that it says the bubble zone : pollen _ puff. So what it's going to do, it's going to look at pollen puff, and then it's going to go, is puff within that? And if it is within that, then it will take that item and it should send it into what I label as pollen, which is right here. So it's going to output to whatever I label as pollen. And then it's going to work on the same thing on the next one. What we have in the asterisk here is comb. It's going to look for anything that has comb in the name. For example, this has honeycomb in the name, and even if it doesn't have a underscore next to it, it will still just look, is comb in there? And so long as it is somewhere within that name, it will then move it. Pretty darn cool and super duper powerful. And the cool part is if we ever need to modify that code, by the way, we can just add more outputs, right? What if we want to also input from our centrifuge after it's all done? We can do that. We can add the centrifuge also as a separate input, and we can even filter what gets pulled out of here or not. And according to the filters, we can even exclude certain things. So we could, for example, say that I wanted to do everything except a certain item, and you can do that as well. Man, I totally recommend you guys playing with these filters and seeing some of the powerful stuff that you can do with SFM. So now that I have that program in, well, let's put it to good use. So I have all of this connected down here with inventory cables, and this is how the Super Factory Manager can be expanded. You utilize these big bundled cables. Yes, I know they are big and they are ugly, but honestly, they're not too bad. Most of the time, this is going to be underground anyways. So we now just need to have the cables connected, and then we can shift right click to pull the labels that we assigned in our program. So we're going to be pulling hive, pollen, and centrifuge off of there and loading them onto our label gun. We right click in the air, and now we get to define those things by clicking it. Now I have hive selected, and I want to select all of my hives. Just like that, all hives are now selected. Perfect. Then I want to define pollen. Pollen is going to be stored here. So there's where pollen is going to go. And then of course, the centrifuge is all the way over here, and the centrifuge then gets defined. So whenever I right click to send this back into the factory manager to tell it where these locations are, that's when the power is going to really show. We're going to see pollen puffs go in here. We're going to see combs be inserted into here. So right click, And look at that. Pollen puffs have now been inserted, and this is now filled because it is trying to take all of these combs out of here and keep this stocked. So let's add to this program, right? If this is actually going to be producing a resource, we might want to send this back into our applied energistic system, right? So we can do that in a couple of ways. We can either directly export this straight through an import bus and take any of the imported items that this gets generated and send it to our applied energistic system, or we can have SFM also pull the items out by adding it to the program and have that also just sent to, I don't know, like an interface. Now, I don't know about you, but I think this would be a cool use of our new wireless connectors that we just set up a few episodes ago. So I can place this and then use this to simply power the channels. And then we just need to link this right here up to the other wireless connector that'll happen down in our tech area. And so I'll just simply add it all the way down here on the bottom, connect it down into this and connect it together. Beautiful. Now this is going to cost a bit of power, but we have plenty to play around with. So yeah, this is going to be so worth it. Now that was just for me to play around with some of those, of course, wireless toys, but of course the best way would have just been utilizing the dimensional chest and just having that be the thing that sends automatically into our storage controller. All right, you got me. This is a tough choice, but yeah, I'm going to have to disregard the wireless connector and sending it through an interface. The dimensional storage honestly is the better option. Soon, I tell you, we'll get to utilize more applied energistics. So I guess for now, we can just place that dimensional chest right here and everything should be good. Now I'm almost positive in a separate program here, we can go ahead and add to this by doing something like this, where we have another kind of operation that's going to happen where every 20 ticks do, and it's going to do something else. We can even define this as every 21 ticks. So it's not happening at the same time. It really doesn't matter. But what we want is we want to output from sent and we want it to go into dim. That way we can have different names than what is defined up here. And when this is done, I believe this should give us more. When we shift right click, it should give us more. Now we have the ability to label dim, which of course is going to be here. And then we also need to define centrifuge. So cent, we might be able to use centrifuge twice instead of doing that. There we go. So now we have two defined on it. It's kind of cool to be able to actually see that they can be labeled as two separate things. And then with that done, we just simply right click to push that. And now the output from this, if we go ahead and give this power, the output of this should automatically now go into that chest. And if everything is all correct, we should see that actually happen. Perfect. So now we should have wax in here, and we do. There we go. So now we're generating wax, and also all of the other items will also start to build up in here. So with it actually going into the dimensional chest, it does make it a little bit easier for me to handle all of the outputs here, because I can just make sure that there is a drawer location for this. And yeah, in our tech room, just simply add it to a drawer. Now, quick tip, just in case you didn't know it, when it comes to these functional storage drawers and adding new ones in, you can put your configuration tool in locking mode in your offhand, and whenever you place in a new drawer, it's going to automatically be locked, which is really helpful, especially when we go to place things like this in, right? I'm going to go ahead and put this block in, so that's going to end up being a nice drawer for all of our wax, and also for our Draconic as well. Oh, and by the way, this should now allow us to get rid of this as our pollen location. So yeah, I want to actually set the pollen location to also be the dim down here. And so now what we can do is remove this as our pollen location, and that should technically now start sending pollen to not this drawer, but basically to our applied energistic system. So the cool thing is like I said, this is scalable, right? So I have this SFM that's running over here. I could just make a copy of that card and copy all of the code over, transfer everything over, and we can expand this way and also expand down this hallway. I also plan on having this roofed. But for right now, any other bees that I plan on adding on here will work and work really, really fast. But we are going to need nether stars, and that kind of moves us into our next issue. What is the easiest way to get nether stars? Well, much like this, it's better to start producing these now than later. And it is going to take some time to build up, and we need power infrastructure. Thankfully, we've set that up in the prior episode. So how do we actually build up this quote unquote Nether star production? Well, hostile neural networks is going to be the best option for this. And for this right now, we can just get started with simply using one simulation chamber and one loot fabricator. And this is a great start for specifically this one boss. Like, there are a lot of other things that we can farm with hostile neural networks, and it's really good for that, and actually gives you a use for your power. But I think one of the best things early on, like I said, is just simply getting nether stars produced. And that's because everything, and I mean everything, uses nether stars. Ooh, and you know what? This would actually be a great time to use this. Now, this makes a whole lot more sense connecting this into our Planologistics system. So there we go. So yeah, we actually get to use some more of those wireless connectors today. Now, first step is, of course, capturing the mob within the model framework. And believe it or not, you can do more than one at a time. So I can actually do like 4 of them at a time. And I think if you have more deep learners on you, you can also do more that way. Kind of a neat little trick. But we have to get the wither, and then I can right click all of these on here. And then I just kind of step back, place them inside of my deep learner, and just have it, like, for example, on my hotbar or what have you. And I should be able to take this out, of course, by taking all of these out, killing the wither in all of its glory by hand. And that should have increased. You can see it says right there, 5 remaining, all of them all at once. And I've just got to kill 5 more. Perfect. After you get your model to at least basic, we can then just level it up by simply having it process on its own. And that's going to take place inside of this room. Right here, I will have myself a simulation chamber. And over here, I have a loot fabricator. So you need both of these machines, and I'm going to need an exporter. And we can create an exporter with a crafting card. And what we can do is we can tell this to keep a certain item in stock, because this is going to need a certain item to run. If I go ahead and put this in, we're going to see that it costs power, which I do have a gate in the back giving it power. But it's also going to require something else. It says it needs prediction matrices, and that is the thing we need to get in here. So let's put the export bus on here, and we will put the crafting card in, and then we just drag the prediction matrix into this, and that should perform the autocraft, putting these automatically into the system here. But now we got to handle 2 different things. We got to handle a quote unquote failed prediction, and we also have to handle a prediction. And I think the best way to do that might be to use modular routers for this. And what we can do is we can take these regular predictions, the Ender ones, for example, and there'll be other ones for other types. And what we can do is we'll send that just into our system to then be stored. We can store it inside of our drawers. So to get that in there, we can go ahead and just connect up into this in ME interface. And then we can have this modular router pull the stuff out. So if we go to modular router, this is what I'm thinking. We will have this set to pull into router. And the reason I want to use this card is so we can add more in the future. And then I will just shift right click. That should then pull the items into the buffer, or at least it should. There we go. So that'll take both predictions and this. And what we want to do is we'll take a push card, send card, or just a regular sender. And for this, we probably want to manage those predictions. So on hostile neural networks, we want to make sure this is set to a whitelist. We want the back to be where it sends. Make sure we double check, make sure this is working. And then we'll go ahead and make sure these filters work. And this is going to be for everything here. And then we double check. Okay, everything is working. Send to the back. And when this goes in, this should send it, you can see going out directly into the interface, which just links directly into our Planologistics system as a way of inserting. Now, I do want to keep the other ones in there. That's why we end up putting a whitelist on this. Like, for example, these wither predictions. And to do this, what I want to do is I want to just create the opposite, but I want this to be going out of the router. And this is because in the future, we may need more loot fabricators in this room. And so, if so, we can always use this distributor module to send to more of these routers. So I'm going to go ahead and right click this location. And in this, we are going to have a blacklist here. And instead, what we'll do is we'll make sure to pull these items in and just blacklist. So that way we don't have to worry about these items ever going into here. So bam, that should be pretty straightforward. And now the predictions should get sent here. And we can go ahead and select Nether Star. But now we need to send into our Planologistics system, and that is where the import is going to come into play. And then, yeah, this does seem a little bit confusing. I don't know why in my brain it really doesn't seem that bad at all. But yeah, the importer is then going to take that item and just send it directly into our applied logistics system to be handled. So because we have networks kind of defined with our storage bus being high priority, what we can do is take our nether stars, right? And we can just add that to our drawer network, and that importer actually will just try to send to our drawer network first. So nether stars can now be added to this network here, just like that. And same with these predictions. Something else we can do is we can actually make it look like this wireless connector if we use a camouflage upgrade, and it'll look like this modular router fits right in with everything else. And so can you believe now we have bees started and we also have nether stars started all in one episode? I really need to slow my roll. So now, just to make this clear, as this model continues to work itself, it is going to slowly but surely level up, and the higher the level, the more likely it is to give us one of those actual nether star predictions. And later on, every single operation, this will go a bit faster and faster, and eventually it'll be producing a nether star so often we'll have thousands of them built up in a blink of an eye. And that, combined with our productive bees, is going to grant us access to some really insane upgrades, right? So if we jump into productive bee upgrades, we can now start to work on these productivity omega upgrades. Now these are going to also require unobtainium, which is definitely in our future, but all of this also requires echo shards. It also is going to require some other stuff, basically utilizing some of the same mods. But notice nether stars being used here in this productivity, but the draconic chunks are the thing that is going to take the longest to essentially gather. And I mean, we can accelerate this ever so slightly by doing this, for example. Like, this will accelerate how quickly we are producing combs. But of course, it's going to be way, way better when we have all of those productivity upgrades in the future. Now, this was merely just the stepping stones for getting into the productive bees mod. And I tell you what, there is going to be some very powerful things that we use the productive bees mods for in the future. But guys, you're going to have to click that subscribe button to be able to find out if I do anything cool with this in the future. So click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give this video, guys, a huge thumbs up. And of course, with that, it's now time to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that amazing thanks is going to go out to Kenny. Thank you so much, by the way, for your amazing support in choosing to support me over on the Discord by becoming a Discord premium member and supporting in one of the best ways possible. Guys, I look forward to seeing you over on the Discord, where I do hang out all the time, so definitely join it if you haven't already. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And as always, thanks for watching.